Today, I'm going to be talking about artistic burnout or creative burnout, whatever you'd like to call it. I'm going to be explaining what it is. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about how I have personally struggled with it as someone who makes a living creating art and just using my artistic skills to provide services to other people. And also, I'm going to be providing 8 tips that are going to help you avoid burnout or overcome it if it's something that you're already struggling with. Some time ago, I created a video in which I explained the difference between artistic burnout and art block. These are 2 very different things, and I'm going to make sure to leave a link to that video down below in the text section of this post in case you are unclear about what you're personally struggling with. It seems to me that a lot of people use these terms interchangeably when they're very different, and it is very important that if you're struggling with either of these, that you know what the root or the cause of the problem is, so that you're able to overcome it. If you don't know what you're personally struggling with, what's creating the problem, you're not going to be able to fix it. Having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and explain a bit about what artistic burnout is. This can happen whether you are a professional artist, a working artist who does this kind of thing for a living, or whether you are an aspiring artist who is working very hard at improving her or his skills so that you can take it to a professional level in the future, or quite simply because you want to get great at drawing or painting. But essentially what happens is that you take on way too much, and usually you let it go on for way too long, and you don't do anything about it because you just feel like you have to do more and more and more. Like what you're doing is never enough. So you move forward, you keep pushing and pushing and pushing to the point that you arrive at burnout. You arrive at exhaustion. You overwork yourself, you exhaust yourself to the point that you're completely depleted and you can't work. Even if you want to work, you just can't. Even though you've been doing everything that you possibly can, you feel sad because something inside of you tells you that you should be farther ahead. You feel exhausted, you feel depleted, and you feel down on yourself all simultaneously. And even though you want to continue growing as an artist because it's so important to you, you've arrived at a point at which you just can't. Even if you try to put pencil or paintbrush to paper, nothing is coming out the way that you want it to. You can't really do much of anything, and your actual current skill level isn't even showing in what you're doing because you're so tired. If you've gone through anything like this, then you've probably suffered from burnout. It is quite common for most artists and creatives of all kinds to go through this kind of thing every so often. And because it's so common, it is very important that we learn about it, that we also learn about ourselves and what works for us, so that we can implement strategies and make sure that we are avoiding getting to that point at all costs. Because an artist or creative's journey is a marathon and not a sprint. And so we have to develop these strategies that are going to enable us to stay consistent over time, even if it means oftentimes doing less from day to day or week to week, because this is going to give us time for the other responsibilities that we have in our personal areas, interpersonal areas, professional areas of our lives that also require our time and energy, so that our art practice can be a part of our lives over the long run. I think it's always important to remember that your art practice, your artistic goals, whatever you're doing as an artist, all of these tasks that you have set for yourself that you're working on, they don't exist in a vacuum. You as a person with a full life, you have a bunch of other things going on, as I said, in your personal life, in your interpersonal life, in your professional life, whatever it is that you do. And you have to make sure that you're making time for all of these different things. For example, I know that when I am not taking care of myself mentally and physically, and I have set aside my exercise, eating right, journaling, all of that, I know that I'm not going to do very well in the other areas of my life because my health is a foundation for everything else. Also, my interpersonal relationships with my family, with my friends, I want to make sure that I am prioritizing those relationships with the important people in my life, with my loved ones. I have to make time for that as well, to nurture those relationships. And I know that if I don't make time for that, then that will also affect my work. So all of these things, whatever your personal mishmash of responsibilities is, whether you have a full-time job, a part-time job, kids, you have to take care of domestic chores, cleaning the house, cooking the food, you're in school, whatever the case may be for you, it is very important to just be very practical and strategic about how you are incorporating those hours of art time into your daily and weekly routines. Be practical, be realistic with what you can achieve, and remember that this current situation that you have is going to be different in some time. In 2 years' time, you're going to be in a different situation, and you may have more time then or less time. It fluctuates. You have to take your current situation into account and make sure that you're establishing artistic goals and breaking those goals into tasks that are practical and realistic for where you're currently at. If you start taking on way too much, it's just a surefire way that you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get overwhelmed, and it's a lot more likely that you're not going to stay consistent, which unfortunately is something that happens to a lot of people. And it kind of irks me because so many people could reach a very, very high level with their art and what they can achieve as artists, but they give up way too soon, and oftentimes it's because of that kind of thing. Thinking of your why, setting SMART goals, establishing priorities, and learning to manage your time are all super important. Before getting into the 8 tips that I want to share with you that'll help you avoid or overcome artistic burnout, I just want to share a little bit about how I have personally struggled with this myself. This is something that happened to me even when I was working my regular jobs as an art teacher, or even at that agency that I was working at as a graphic designer. What made me leave the graphic design job after 3 years of working at that agency was that experience of ending up at the hospital. I couldn't even breathe without the underneath of my ribs hurting. I couldn't stand up properly. I had to walk like this, and I had to spend 2 entire weeks just laying in bed, and it was horrible because I couldn't even find a position that was comfortable to lay in. I thought I was gonna die. That's when I changed my entire kind of lifestyle. I started eating better, I started exercising, and I started just being a little bit more mindful of making time for myself and learning to say no and establishing boundaries and that kind of thing. Standing up for myself a little bit more as well. After that situation, I left that job and I spent 7 years teaching art full-time as head art teacher in a school environment. And for any of you out there who are school teachers or have been school teachers in the past, you know how incredibly stressful that is. You have to be on the entire time when you get to school at 7:30 in the morning to the time you leave school. You have to be on, which is incredibly hard for an introvert, and you have to put other people's needs in front of your own all day long, group after group after group of 25 kids or however many kids that you have to be helping simultaneously. I was lucky if I had 15 minutes to eat during the day, and like if I had a chance to go to the bathroom at all. And also dealing with parents and dealing with staff, especially when you're in the arts department, if you're a music teacher, an art teacher, whatever the case may be. Other teachers sometimes don't think that your classes are as important or that you need as much help. You know, a bunch of things contributed to this stress, and I stayed there for 7 years. So I was able to take it on, but what helped, I think, in that situation was that I did get longer breaks. I did do my master's during many of those Easter breaks and whatnot, but you can count on having a 1.5 month long vacation off from work. So you always have that kind of carrot, right, in front of you to work towards. You know that it's going to end and you're going to have that time. So that helped me, but honestly, when I look back to those 7 years, I don't even know how I was able to manage the noise, the chaos, the rising responsibilities and limitations and removal of resources. I had over 300 students each semester that I had to help simultaneously, and art shows to set up completely on my own at the end of each semester and all that. And it was a lot. When I think back to those years, I honestly don't even know how I did it, how I didn't go crazy. I do remember the last month or two at the end of each semester being completely drained and depleted, just having no energy at all when I got home and not wanting to do very much at all. I was so tired from talking all day and from having my brain constantly think of how to solve problems and how to put out fires that I didn't even feel like talking to my husband. I was so tired. And so I think that's how burnout kind of reflected in that situation. And now, as a professional artist that owns her own business, I had that experience in the past, and I know how important it is to establish boundaries and to say no and to stand up for myself and all these kinds of things. And so since the beginning, I made sure to bring in that knowledge and that experience that I gained from those past jobs. But as a business owner, a whole bunch of other things come into play. There's the imposter syndrome. There's the fact that you don't have a boss telling you what to do, giving you due dates or things like that. And so all these things you have to learn for yourself. But from 2017 onwards, I've learned so much in terms of time management and prioritizing and making sure that I am setting aside time every day, every week for my mental and physical well-being. As a business owner and a one-woman show, I know that I have to avoid burnout at all costs. And I have to have strategies in place to be able to get out of it if I do go into a burnout, because if I stop, then my business won't grow. That is a problem, because if my business doesn't keep growing, I may have to go back to a regular job. I love what I do so much, and I want to make sure that I'm able to continue doing this over the long run. The tips that I'm going to be sharing with you next are exactly that. The things that I make sure to have in my mind to bring into my routines every week, every month, so that I'm able to stay productive consistently and also happy as I am putting in the work. Because I bring these things in today, I rarely run into an artistic burnout. And whenever I feel like I am starting to get there, I know exactly what I need to do to avoid it. Tip number 1 to avoid or overcome artistic burnout is to establish a self-care routine. Make your mental and physical well-being a priority, and make sure that you're scheduling in activities every day or every week so that you can make sure that you are taking care of these important aspects of your life and make them a priority. Make them non-negotiables. Learn to listen to your mind and to your body. Most of us don't know how to do this. One of the tips that I always give to my students is, if you are working on a drawing or a painting and you're starting to feel frustrated, tired, overwhelmed, stop working. Go get your rest, go get a bite to eat, go get a drink, come back the following day with a fresh set of eyes, well rested and ready to start focusing again. Because what happens is that you're just going to continue pushing when you're already tired, frustrated, and these negative emotions are coming in. And what's going to happen is you're going to stop looking at your references, you're going to start working too fast, you're going to start ignoring that strategy that you created for the piece that you were working through. And all of that is going to translate into you making bigger and bigger mistakes that are going to keep snowballing. And it's going to be such a big mistake later on that you're not going to be able to fix it. What are you doing currently on a daily basis and on a weekly basis to stay healthy, to stay happy? And if you're not doing much at all, take this as a very loving, friendly reminder to start doing something now. Remember that your health, your mental and physical well-being is the basis and the foundation for everything else that you do, including your artistic projects. Moving on to tip number 2, and this one is to know your limits and honor them. So I understand that many times you have to actually put yourself through the process several times so that you can start getting to know yourself as an artist, your creative process, and also what you are and what you're not able to do in a given amount of time or whatever the case may be. You have to actually do the thing in order to understand your limits. But once you start uncovering those limits, honor them. Remember that everyone is on her or his own path. It's like all of us artists are on different ships and we're all in the same ocean, floating through, moving through the same ocean, right? And we can shout at each other, from boat to boat, but ultimately you're on your own boat, you're steering your own ship, you have to take care of that ship. And we may be on different paths because we all have different goals and we all have different starting points. There's no need and no use in comparing yourself to other boats, to other artists. You are on your own boat, you have to take care of that ship so that you can get to your end point, to your goal point. We have different strengths and weaknesses. We have different limitations. We have different paces that we like working at. And whatever the case may be for you, that's perfectly fine and where you should be. Honor that, honor who you are, and honor how you do things. As long as you keep moving a step at a time in the right direction and you're taking care of that ship, that is really all you need in order to see a ton of progress over time. Even if you're able to do just a small amount of work, a small amount of progress, stay consistent with that small amount of work over time. Don't push yourself too far because you are comparing yourself with other people who are farther ahead and have been able to accomplish a ton because they've been at it for years and they have maybe more time than you do to work on their art. Don't compare yourself to them and don't push yourself to the point that you're not enjoying the work that you're putting in, because then what often happens is that you give up or you stop creating art for years, and then you have to start from scratch all over again. Moving on to tip number 3, and this one is a biggie for me, and it's something that I have to continue reminding myself to do, but it's so important. And this one is to celebrate your wins, not only the big wins, but also the smaller ones. Each and every single drawing, each and every single painting that you create, that is something to be celebrated because you put yourself through a very challenging process. It's not easy to create art. So whatever the outcome was for that piece, whether it was good or bad or somewhere in between, it is still worth celebrating the fact that you put yourself through that process and you learned lots of things through that process that you're going to be able to apply in future pieces. The creation of every single piece, if you shared a new artwork with the world via social media, or one of your paintings was exhibited somewhere, if you finally opened up your Etsy shop, if you finally sold your first piece, if someone complimented your work or told you that they felt connected to your piece, all of those things are amazing things that are worth celebrating. Don't set them aside, don't minimize them, because they are amazing, amazing milestones. And if you celebrate your wins, it's also a lot more likely that you're going to stay consistent over time. Moving on to tip number 4, and this one is don't compare yourself to others. It's very easy, especially with the internet and social media nowadays, to constantly compare yourself, compare your art journey to other people's, because you're constantly thrown this amazing artwork and these beautiful studios and these beautiful celebrations and milestones that other artists are reaching in their own journeys. What happens when you're just seeing these perfect snapshots, because remember, social media is like a portfolio for professional artists. And yet I assure you that bad art, duds, accidents, and all that kind of stuff is happening behind the scenes. You're just not seeing it. The duds, the accidents, the bad art is necessary for you to be able to create those amazing pieces that you're very proud of. But as I said, social media is just a show of beautiful, perfect moments and great snapshots that have been not only in many cases manipulated, but selectively chosen. These professional artists have to show their best work because that's how they're getting more clients and more work, and that's how they're making a living. So what happens many times is that aspiring artists, people who are just getting started, they see all that and they think that artists are just creating beautiful masterpieces all the time, but that is not the case at all. You cannot compare yourself to someone who has been at it for 5, 10, 15 years. You're just getting started. You're at a different point in your journey, and comparing yourself to that is only going to set you back. It's going to make you frustrated, and you're just going to get more overwhelmed because you're going to constantly feel that you should be farther ahead when that is not the case at all. You should be focusing on where you're currently at and enjoying the point that you're currently at. Limit social media and make sure that you're using it strategically in a positive way to inform your work, to get inspired. Don't go into social media if you know that you're just going to be going into a negative downward spiral and comparing yourself to other people. Just go into social media when you're going to be able to use it for its positive benefits. Moving on to tip number 5, and this one was incredibly hard for me to get used to doing, especially as a recovering people pleaser, but this one is to learn to say no. Learn to say no to activities, to people's requests that are not going to help you get close to your personal goals in all of these areas. I don't mean just as an artist, I also mean in your interpersonal, personal, and professional goals. So, for example, if you set a personal goal to wake up earlier every morning from Monday through Friday, and you are invited to a late night event where there is going to be lots of drinking and like noise and partying on a Wednesday, it might be worth considering saying no to that. Maybe if the party is on a Friday or a Saturday, you can consider it, but you've already prioritized waking up early so that you can be productive since earlier in the day from Monday through Friday. So in that case, it is kind of going against and affecting one of those goals that you have set for yourself. Same thing goes for your interpersonal goals. So maybe you have set a goal for yourself to stop working at 5 so that you can have dinner with your family at 6. And so if you want to stop working at 5 so that you can have dinner with your family, and all of a sudden you get an email from someone requesting that you do something at 4:30, then maybe it's worth you responding and saying, hey, I am going to get to this until tomorrow, just a heads up, or simply honoring the fact that this is something that you set for yourself that is important and not reading the email at all. If you know that you're the kind of person that is going to want to get to work on that request, immediately when you read that email, set a limit for yourself, set that rule so that you're able to stop working at 5. Consider saying no to that kind of thing if they go against your goals. Otherwise, what I have found is that if you say yes to everyone's requests all day long, you're not going to get any of your personal projects done. You're not going to make any progress towards any of your personal goals. And of course, life happens. People, loved ones, friends, they're going to need your help from time to time. But just be careful, because a lot of the times people come at us with their requests or just simple interruptions during the day. And as creatives, as artists, we need to get into the flow. And if people are constantly interrupting us and asking us for things, it's going to be very difficult to make any progress towards anything. If you have a lot of trouble with distractions, you can also set your phone on airplane mode, which is what I do, so that you don't hear that dinging and ringing all day long. And also, for example, when checking email, you can check your email at specific times during the day, maybe 2 times during the day, and that's it, right? So that you're not checking email 50 times a day. Those things are distractions, and a lot of the times, it's not emergency situations that people are reaching out with. It's just random little questions and things like that that could wait. And it's very important that you protect that time and that energy so that you can get into that flow state and not get constantly interrupted. So learn to say no, learn to set limits for yourself, little rules that are going to help you stay focused on what you have to do. And remember that time is your most valuable resource and it's non-renewable. So you're not getting back those minutes, that time that you lost. Moving on to tip number 6, and this one is to make time for play in your art routines or your artistic practice. I think it is dangerous, honestly, to take ourselves and our work too seriously and to not learn to separate ourselves from our work. I know that art is a very personal thing and it takes a lot of time and effort to produce art, and it is to a certain point an extension of ourselves, but it's also important to separate ourselves from the work that we produce, because whatever it is that we produce, that's not our entire person. That's just a tiny piece of who we are at this given point in time, and we change and we evolve, and what we are is so much greater than just that one single drawing or painting. And this is very helpful as well, so that we can learn to leave our ego at the door, which is so important because as artists, we're constantly taking feedback from other people, even obtaining critique from people that we didn't even ask critique from. And we have to be okay with that. And so if we learn to separate ourselves from our work, and we know that that's not all of us, it's just one little thing that we produced at that given point in time, it's a lot more likely that we're not going to take it personally. But also something that I always recommend to my students and community members is not all of your pieces are meant to be perfect, polished, or even finalized masterpieces. Make time for play, for exploration, for ugly work. Those types of practice are also so important for us to be able to grow as artists. It's how we find ourselves, how we discover our strengths and weaknesses, how we discover our own creative process, how we discover new tools that we love that are going to help us arrive at our own unique art style or way of doing things. It's through that exploratory work. Set aside time for play, for exploration, to do things just for the fun of it. Not everything that you do has to be super hard, super challenging, and super serious all the time. Most likely than not, you're probably interested in a whole bunch of different creative activities. So I can tell you for myself, I love to cook. I would love to continue learning how to play guitar because I love music. I love to write. I love collaging, and all of these are activities that maybe they're not my priority when it comes to the area that I want to grow artistically in. It's not like my main artistic medium that I want to grow with, or it doesn't help me learn or advance my skills with that particular subject that I want to grow in. But these are all still great creative outlets that add to my life, that make me happier. And if I am happier and I am enjoying life and just exploring creativity in different ways, when I go back to that work that I am seriously trying to grow in, I'm going to have just greater ideas, greater flow, and I'm going to be happier, which is going to show in my work. So make sure that you're not getting super hyper focused, that is all that you're doing, all of that serious work. Make time for other things that you enjoy. As an artist, it's important that you explore creativity in different ways and enjoy your life, because this is going to show in your work. All right, and finally moving on to the very last tip. This is tip number 8. And I left this one for the end because it's something that I am incredibly passionate about and I have not talked about it as much as I should. This one is, don't fall for the myth of the tortured artist. You do not have to suffer to create great art. I 100% believe that if you enjoy yourself when you're creating, that is going to show in your work and it's going to make it better. And I know that we have been shown all of these different examples of amazing artists, musicians, all of these different people who have been amazingly talented, considered geniuses by many people, who have been tortured, who have been just struggling with depression and all of these different things in their lives. And they were able to create amazing artwork that have influenced and impacted so many of us. However, there have been many examples of artists who have had happy lives, who have enjoyed creating art, who have had ideas come in for new pieces or even new movements from positive things that happened as well. Or even artists who lived through very tough times, wars and things like that, but they remained positive, and through their art, they wanted to bring positivity to people. The tortured artist is very romanticized, and many times, because of our human nature, those negative, sad stories, they tend to stick in our brains more, to the point that we might feel as artists that we need to be in that very negative, sad place in order to create great art, but that is not the case at all. I want to encourage you to enjoy your artistic journey, to stay positive, to have that growth mindset that I've talked about before. And always remember that amazing, unique art, groundbreaking art even, can come from a place of joy, of love, of peace and light. Don't fall for that romantic myth of the tortured artist, because that's all it is. It's a myth.